Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this is going to be our last Sheikh and Shai for the term, because in Ramadan we're going to be starting a new halaqa bi'idhnillah. Stay tuned. So you guys have a familiar face here, Brother Umair, and I heard that it was a really banger Sheikh and Shai because everybody stayed for a good 2 hours or something.
Spreading lies before Ramadan.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, we have Brother Habeeb here for the first time. Alhamdulillah. So the discussion today is going to revolve a lot around what's going to be coming up this year, the elections, of course, right? So with that being said, I'm going to just kick off with some introductions. So Brother Habeeb, you want to start off by telling us a bit about yourself, what you do, what's your background?
Sure. So my name is Habeeb. I actually studied here for about 5 years actually, technically, in the software engineering program. Graduated in 2017, and I work as a software engineer. So not quite politics related, but I'll do my best. I'm technically actually here on behalf of CMPAC, which is the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council. It's an organization that was started in September of 2021, and I kind of operate very recently as their liaison for this local area. So Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph, all these local areas. So CMPAC as an organization basically is a collective that aims to work in the best interests of Muslims in Canada. So through politics, through mobilization of vote of the Muslim community, they aimed to basically advocate for Muslim causes. Right now, obviously, the primary focus is Gaza and West Bank, Palestine. But outside of that, there are some other causes that we try to push for. I think what makes CMPAC slightly different from other or similar organizations is that they have more of a partisan approach to voting and voting strategy. And I'll we'll hopefully talk about that in a little bit. And the aim is to use grassroots volunteers to help mobilize local communities across Canada. Because obviously there's 2 million Muslims in Canada out of the 40 million approximately population. And so we're at a point in our history in this country where we have a voice, we have something to say, and inshallah we can work towards a better future for Muslims in Canada and by extension abroad. That's kind of all I wanted to say.
For sure. Raise of hands, how many of you guys have heard of CMPAC? 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Now you walk away with 40 more people that know. 2 things I'll quickly say about CMPAC, which I love about their work because we work really closely with them. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. I apologize for this. CMPAC has taken on 2 big bodies of Canadian governmental structures. Who do you think? Can you guys name which those 2 are? Just yell. When you come into Canada, who's the first person you see? When you're at the airport? Immigration officer. What is that body called? CB?
Canadian Border Services?
Yes, CBSA. Yeah. CMPAC has directly taken on CBSA. And that's huge. Right? Going to the borders and be like, you guys are, sorry, can I say this? You guys are racist, right? Or you guys are discriminating. And so that's huge. And the second one that they're taking on is, it's March. What do you guys got to do? Taxes. Who do you file them with? CRA, exactly. Taking on the CRA. So 2 really big organizations that they've taken on. So good work to them, and I'll let you talk more about them afterwards. My name is Umair. I'm the executive director for the Canadian Muslim Vote. I hope there's more hands this time that you guys have heard of our work a little bit. But essentially, we're an organization that focuses on political engagement and civic education and political engagement. Essentially, our idea is we want to make politics accessible for everyone, but at the same time, we want to understand it better. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of stuff that's thrown out that we don't necessarily know or understand or even know how to interact with, right? Sometimes we might understand something, but we're not sure, how do I engage with this? So our job is to sort of help answer those questions as best as we can. but it's also a space for all of you to come in and explore ideas and explore areas that help you becoming more engaged in political science and how you want to engage in politics. It's sort of important to understand our own beginnings at times. So I know a lot of us are. How many of us are first generation or second generation immigrants? All right, right. How many of us come from democratic countries? Ish, right? That's baggage. That's trauma. That's things that we have to work through, right? Our parents came from those structures and they ran away from that. So how many of them are going to actively tell you, Habibi, beta jaake, go into politics or be engaged in politics? And when you tell them you're going to get involved in politics, what's their first thing that they say? No. Or be careful. Both are very good answers, by the way. But it's important for us. It's because it comes from a place of fear. And what's the best way of overcoming fear? Facing it, exactly. Right? We got to face our fears. And the best way to face your fears is you got to educate yourself on it. So that's what we do. Our job is to make it accessible, make it easy, and sort of help everyone sort of through it. Last time I shared a little bit about why I got involved in politics, so I'll quickly touch base on that. But today I'm going to talk a little bit more about what sort of drives that a little bit. But I essentially got involved was when the Quebec mosque shooting happened, our 6 brothers that were martyred, none of the 6 actually got buried in Quebec City. And that was predominantly because of the fact that the Quebec City Council had never approved a Muslim cemetery. That was my guide into becoming involved in politics. Because how can we say something as simple as a plot of land to bury our dead is not getting approved by people that have been elected by us? Take that in for a second. How can someone that has been elected in by the population saying no to allowing their own people from their own communities being allowed to be buried in that city? It took Quebec 21 years for them to be approved of a Muslim cemetery. Do you think that's still happening in Canada, where communities are saying no to Muslim cemeteries? Yes or no? Yes. Till today. So this is why we got to get involved in politics in different ways. I'll pass it over to you. Sorry I speak too much. You got to cut me
great.
off.
You're great.
Habeeb, you're going to have to cut me off.
I was actually going to segue into that and ask each of you. So you explained the cemetery thing, but what sort of, because you both are locals in a sense. You're Laurier grad and you're a Waterloo grad. What sent you down this path of advocacy and politics?
Yeah. So I would say my path is just beginning. So I just started volunteering with CMPAC very, very recently, maybe a few months ago. For me personally, obviously the catalyst was the images and things we see from the catastrophe that's come out of Palestine, right? And everybody knows what it feels like as a Muslim, living in the West, to see something like that and feel basically a sense of hopelessness and powerlessness. What can we do except even just say something against it, right? And even that, in some places, people feel afraid to even do, right? So for me, it was initially I used to kind of think that perhaps there's literally nothing we can do as Muslims living in the West. But then the more I kind of read into politics, how things work on a local and federal basis, and kind of paid attention to what's happening in the United States, the more I kind of realized that at the end of the day, the vote is what matters, right? So politicians obviously will take money, will take, basically legalized bribes in the form of lobbying, and work their magic to get elected. But at the end of the day, the one thing that they all fear is their seat in the House of Commons, right? Or whichever legislative assembly that they're a part of. So what I found is that Muslims make up a critical mass of very critical ridings in Canada. And we have a direct capability, as long as we move in unison, to actually make an impact on the fears and the wants of politicians, right? So if we can manage to move as a single group and vote in a single way, as much as possible, we have a chance at kind of changing the general, you could call it zeitgeist of discourse in the country, right? There's this thing called the Overton window. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but it's kind of the range of acceptable opinions that exist within a society. If you fall outside of that, you're extreme on one side or the other. But if you're in there, you're kind of like, generally that's the accepted set of like discourse that one can take part of. And I've observed, and many people have obviously observed, that over the course of the last 1.5 years of the genocide that's happening in Palestine, that Overton window, as it pertains to Palestine itself, has shifted significantly, right? Both in the United States and as well in Canada, through the efforts, mostly grassroots, of people that are constantly working to expose lies, to promote truths, and to attempt to hold our elected officials accountable, to the very like principles that they profess to uphold, right? So we, in summary, we as Muslims living in the West have kind of a grave responsibility, in my opinion, to ensure that we hold these politicians accountable to their promises, whether that's the Bill of Human Rights or whatever treaty we've signed into, and that serves a very critical role in helping our brothers and sisters overseas, right? Because we all know that the only reason Israel is allowed to do the things that it does is through the explicit support of Western institutions, right? So if we work to hopefully change that, then maybe one day we arrive in a world where Israel is no longer allowed to do those things, right? Yeah.
So can you just tell more about what you do? I know you said you started off about
The question is just asking Brother Habeeb more about what he does.
Yeah. So my kind of entry into this like world is just to do a small part, right, in that movement. Whatever little I can do to contribute, I think that it's better than obviously doing nothing. It's kind of what motivated me.
Nice.
I mean, strategic voting is one thing, but like we have so many issues: Palestine, like immigrant rights, Islamophobia. I mean, how can you get the unicorn that has all three of these like issues? And then the other issue is like how many Muslims are mobilized to vote based on your triangulation of all these issues? But I mean, how many people care and also like talking to get Muslims to vote, but another thing that other groups do is like they appeal to the wider population, so it's not just your own ethnic or religious group, but to get actually people like say in universities, like, younger people throughout the whole. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim or not. You want to appeal to everyone. That's when they really fear you, and like that's another issue. If we only find ourselves as Muslim, we're losing some of the block.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to sum some of the question. The question is asking, there's party A which has X opinion. There's party B which has Y opinion. How do you sort of reconcile those differences? So us as Muslims, how do you sort of endorse values of party A that you support, but not other values that you don't support? But then there's party B, which you also support some things in, but not in other things. So how do you sort of reconcile those differences and find a sweet spot?
Want to take it?
Yeah, sure. So as I'm here on behalf of CMPAC, I should really speak to their like kind of strategy, and I do more or less agree with that strategy, right? So let me see how to like kind of formulate it. So I guess the gist of it is essentially that what CMPAC tries to focus on is really focusing on just one particular issue, and that is the issue of Palestine, right? The idea being that their suffering and hardship that they're going through outweighs anything that we could possibly experience here as Canadians living in Canada, right? So that's kind of their like thinking, which is that on a riding per riding basis, right, 343 ridings across all of Canada, they want to identify those ridings where the Muslim vote outweighs the margin. So typically in different ridings, you have, very clearly it's going to go towards one party, or very clearly it's going to go towards some other party. But then there's those specific ridings which kind of make or break the election, where the margin is very small between the two parties or the three parties or whatever, right? And there are certain ridings within those that have a Muslim population that outnumbers any sort of margin, right? Which means that if we can manage to mobilize that Muslim vote, we can send a very clear message to politicians saying that you can't take our vote for granted, and we will vote in alignment with the cause. And so, while at the federal level, after all the votes are tallied and counted, maybe it's not a favorable outcome for Muslims at large. That thinking is that we will take on that hardship for the next, X number of years until the next election, 3, 4, whatever it gets called. But in the meantime, we will make sure to continue to lobby and continue to drive that message towards politicians using our track record and their track record as like as kind of data for them to learn that the Muslim community is going to vote in a particular direction, right? And we kind of saw that similar concept occurring in the United States, except I don't feel like they had a lot of movements there had enough time to prepare. We kind of saw that, in states like Michigan, for instance, Harris lost by massive numbers, completely upset essentially, because of the fact that people just stayed home. They couldn't stomach placing their vote for a party that had facilitated a genocide of their brothers and sisters for the last, and their family members for the last 1.5 years. So our thinking is kind of similar, except we hope to have more time to prepare, more time to plan, more time to get Muslims to register to vote, and hopefully more time to really convey the message first to politicians, say that we will be voting in this way, then complete the vote in that way, and then afterwards go back to them and say, look what happened. You heeded the message, you did the right thing, and we got you in power, or you didn't heed the message and we made sure that you lost, essentially, right?
If please, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you see your role more as are you a lobbying group, or you pressure, you pressure politics, how do you, what is your general strategy, what does your organization identify as in order to kind of push that, pressure?
Question is, what do each of your respective organizations sort of identify as their main strategy of advocacy? Is it more pressure politics? Is it more lobbying, or is it something else?
You can finish, and then I'll answer all the questions from my end.
Oh, thank
Right.
you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So CMPAC does a combination, right? So I'm not sure what you mean by pressure politics, but more practically, they basically convey the message to different politicians in different ridings. So people who are going to be running in the next election, we go to their offices and we deliver letters. We and in the past, CMPAC has staged sit-ins. In the past, they've done protests. So basically, any method by which we can get that message across that we're going to vote in a particular way in this community, that's one part of it. In terms of lobbying, in the traditional sense, as far as I know, they don't really, basically do. I think maybe there's some minor campaign contribution. I'm not 100% sure. Probably have to check with the leadership there. But by and large, I think the focus is mainly on leveraging just our population, right, to vote in the correct direction. You don't necessarily need massive amounts of funds and funneling money to different politicians when you could just motivate people to get on the ground and actually vote, because that's what really matters at the end of the day, right?
I guess a few things just to sort of align ourselves a little bit. When it comes to the Muslim ecosystem right now, things are drastically changing, especially on the front of organizations doing different work. TCMV, we're nonpartisan. That means we can't endorse or select anyone. Our job is to educate, right? We can't tell you to vote party A or party B or party C or party D. What we can do is, here's everything, you decide now. We'll bring you up to the point where you can critically think by yourself about, okay, what matters and what doesn't matter. And I'll tell you what that looks like in just a second. CMPAC and CCM, the organization, their job is more that political pressure, as you're saying, about taking a certain policy and really hammering at it, right? To a point where it's okay, you need to start listening to us in our community at what we're trying to say here. The more pressure there is, the more that whatever that, even in that massive scheme of things, systematically, there'll be some movement in that situation. Then there's a new organization by the name of the Nasser Muslim Action Fund. the National Muslim Action Fund. They are now what you were just mentioning a little bit about providing back-end support through financial means to different politicians, right? Now they're a whole separate group. But when you're looking at the full Canadian ecosystem now, when we're all working at it and we're looking at this from multifaceted angles, everyone's doing their part to do what? To get the message across that how many Muslims are in Canada? I said it last time. No, 2 million, 1.8. 1.8 million. How many Muslims are in America? 3 million, 5 million?
It's about double, I think. Of
Yeah, so 4.45 million, all right? America's how many, what's America's full population?
430?
400, 350, whatever, somewhere around that, right? Canada's what, 40? Something a little bit, right? So on average, the Muslim voice in Canada has a bigger impact than the Muslim voice in America, right? Always remember one thing. When you go talk to your MP or your MPP or anyone, your MP is one of 343 people representing their riding or electoral district. Your MP is an MP of a G7 country. There's power in that. When they're like, nah, I can't do much, I'm sorry, my party this, my party that. No, that's bogus, right? Yes, we need to learn how the system works, but that's sort of where it comes down to. Your initial question was, how do we sort of get involved in advocacy and why it's so important about being involved in this? My journey is a little different because I used to work at Islamic Relief and then I made my way over to TCMV. When I say this phrase, can you just translate that after me? Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. What does that mean? Say it loud.
All power to Allah and to Him in return.
All power to Allah and to Him return. Okay. What else does it mean? Allah is sufficient for us, and He alone is the best disposer of our affairs. Who do you think mentions that the most? Philistines. Right? And I say this because in 2019, I got a chance to visit Lebanon. And in Lebanon, I went to a refugee camp in Tripoli. In that refugee camp, I got to meet a family. A 10-year-old boy came and he was Hafiz, mashallah. Beautiful recitation. This is a very heavy story, so if anybody wants to cover their ears or leave the room, I would recommend that. But I need to share this because it really matters as to why it was so important. I remember we were sitting with him, we played with him, and it was just an incredible moment because there was a lot of kids and we're getting to know them. And as my job with Islamic Relief, one of the things was to go visit orphans and different people and get their story. So we went into their room and I had 3 mothers sit with us. I don't understand Arabic. Very little, bishoy, right? Egyptians, I don't know what you speak, all right? But I remember, like, we're sitting there, and we're like these 3 mothers are sitting there, and I have a translator with me, Brother Tariq, amazing brother. He's now translating everything over, and these mothers, on their tip of their tongue was Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel the entire time, and they're telling me in detail their life story and how they got from Syria into Lebanon. 2019. When did the war start in Syria? 2012, 13, 14, somewhere around that time. It's almost 5 years after. If you ever go to a border, that's when you understand when people say that they crossed a border to come into a different country, how difficult that looks. Between Syria and Lebanon, there's mountains. So these kids, 7, 8, 9, 5, 6-year-olds, are walking with their mothers up a mountain, down a valley, into another country. Right? Sah. Cox's Bazar, Myanmar. Right? Bangladesh and Myanmar. The Rohingya, when they fled from their homeland across a river into Bangladesh. Right? This is the state of refugees, and I'm sharing this for a very particular reason. As Islamic Relief, our job was to go and help these people, right? But ultimately, at each time, we kept hearing Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. I remember that mother sat down and told me that 10-year-old boy, after they made it into Lebanon, was selling tissues on the side of the street. How many times have we walked by a kid selling tissues and we're like, no, I don't want any. Right? Change of mindset. Like, you don't know what they've gone through. That 10-year-old boy, my mom got a job in a bakery. And this, if it's heavy this time, and I'm going to share this, but I apologize for my forget. He was assaulted. Doctors Without Borders had to get involved and do STD testing on this 10-year-old boy. And what's coming out of the mom's mouth? Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. These are stories that are happening in the world because of the politics of our world. They're happening to our brothers and sisters across the world because of the politics of this world. So when we ask why do we do this stuff? Why do we speak up? Why are we talking about all this? Is because of this reason. When we put pressure on our governments, because our governments send aid and money and things across the world, or they're not providing for services in Canada, it's because of this reason. Go sit with the natives, right? They're our brothers and sisters. How many of their reserves are anywhere near what they should be in a country in Canada? They're not. Do we care? Sure. It's bad. So that's usually what we say. It's bad. It shouldn't happen. But how many of us take that extra effort to know, okay, what can I do? Right? So when we're talking about getting involved in this level, in this space, and in these people, because I'll tell you one thing, when you sit with the shuyukh, they'll tell you one thing. Whenever anyone that you're giving money to, right, they're closer to Allah than you are. Right? They're closer to Allah. Allah's testing them in different ways. Right? It's your responsibility. What are you going to do for them? Alhamdulillah, we're living really good lives. For the most part, I would say we are. We have a lot to be thankful for, and we have a lot to be, but we will be tested. Allah will question us about this. The shuyukhs will never tell you that we have to get a result, correct? They'll tell you that you have to make an effort. Everyone has to do their part, whatever that looks like. So even when you're getting involved politically, that's one thing that we want to get involved. So this is where my journey began in all of this. And then you're starting to see, okay, this is all happening around the world. Things are happening in Canada. You can't get a spot to get buried. Some places where, like, take Quebec, for example, right? Like half this room can't get a job in the public sector because they're wearing a hijab. Think about that for a second. That's Canada, 2025. NCCM and different organizations are suing the Quebec government on this. But do you not think that if one province brings it in, that it cannot spread across into different provinces? You're kidding yourself. You're kidding yourself if you think that can't happen. This is why it's so important for all of us to be engaged, to be involved, and to be doing all these different things. And I go back to it. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Allah is sufficient for us. Allah is the best disposer of our affairs. And we got to put this in front of me, bro. My wife said make healthy choices today. I can't do this. It's all you guys. But back to this, right? So, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. I say this is because this is the word you're going to hear the most out of the people from Palestine. Right? Last January, we got a chance to go to Palestine. Myself and 19 other people. On that trip was NCCM, Islamic Relief, IDRF, the Palestinian coalitions, and 5 MPs, 5 member of parliament. Heather McPherson, Matthew Green, Lindsay Matheson, Shafkat Ali, and Salma Zahid. We were in Palestine and Jordan for 6 days. In that 6 days, we got a chance to spend with Palestinians that are living in Jordan. Since when?
48.
48. And then? What was the second? 67. And then?
73.
Yes. And then. Do you think those that came in 1948 or 1967 or the ones that just came, has their situation got any better? No. They're living in small little refugee cities, essentially what they're called. Yes, they're not tents anymore, but they're second-class citizens. Right? This is happening. Then we got to go into Jerusalem. And crossing that border, right, was another ordeal. The guy that questioned me was from Montreal. Right? We get in, we get to spend some time, and as soon as you enter into the West Bank, right, it starts. And people are like, what? What starts? There's two different roads. One road where if you have a yellow license plate, you can drive on. Those are Israeli license plates. Another road which you can drive if you have a green or white license plate. Are those roads taken care of? No. Are you allowed to drive with the green or white license plate on the yellow? No. Right? And then you get into Jerusalem. Right? It's surreal. When I say surreal to be going into the streets, because this is a prophetic. We're all prophets. This is where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam led the prophets in prayer at Al-Aqsa. Right? You're looking and you see it's so much to take in. You're driving through Sheikh Jarrah. You're getting to your hotel. You get off. You check in. You get out. Now you're walking into the old cities. You're surrounded by cameras. You're surrounded by people holding big guns and pointing them at you. Right? This is Jerusalem. You go in and then you get inside the Al-Aqsa complex. How many of you have been to Masjid Al-Aqsa? Anyone? How many of you been to Medina Munawwara? What's Medina known for? What do you feel when you enter Medina? Prophet's Mosque. What else? What's the feeling?
Serenity.
Peace, serenity. The only other place in this world that I have felt that same peace and serenity was where? Masjid Al-Aqsa. Surrounded by chaos on all sides. When you put your head down in sujood, there's nothing like it. How many of us have the opportunity to visit Al-Aqsa? All of you, pretty much. All of us do. Yeah, we have to sit in an airport for a few hours to get questioned and all these different things. But I remember when we were inside the masajid, the elders came up to us because they don't allow the locals between the ages of 15 to 40 to come. He's like, if you in the West that can come here don't populate these masajids, then who will? Right? The next day, we come back out, right? We get a chance to go to Al-Khalil, Hebron, and Bethlehem. The other group gets to go into Jenin and Ramallah, right? We both come back, we're not the same people. Most difficult things that we have ever seen were in those two cities, or in those four cities, sort of two different trips. The curfews, the checkpoints, the state of people, the desperation, right? You're looking at this. It's the most, entering into Al-Khalil was probably the most insane thing I've ever done. It's the definition of apartheid. There's metal cages above top. You're walking through small little streets. There's settlers living on different areas. The most insane thing that I saw was on top of Palestinian houses, a settler built a basketball court. Sitting there playing ball. Kobe. Actually, I don't think you guys say Kobe anymore, whatever you guys say nowadays. But that's what it was. Right? That's the definition of apartheid. This is what's happening. All 5 MPs came back, and on their final reflection, they cried. I share their story for one reason. Had we not taken them, do you think they would have had that same impact? Other people do. Other people take people all the time across the different parts of the world. This was the first time that a trip went to Palestine. They came back, and we have answers, and I'll share this with you guys. They came back and they spoke about their experiences where? Parliament. This is also political engagement. There's different ways of doing it. Right? So when we're talking about getting involved, getting engaged, there's a lot of different ways of doing this. But at the core of it, what it comes down to, and I've said this to you guys last time, is why do you want to get involved? What is your why? All of you have different answers, and you have your own answers, but you need to answer that. And then how are you going to help? CMPAC, TCMV, NCCM, get involved in politics, go vote, go do all these different things. That's what it is. Sorry, I speak too much.
Awesome.
You gotta cut me off, man.
That was awesome, right? Yeah, mashallah. Yeah, helwa.
What kind of strategy do you guys have to kind of scale your operation to make sure that it's more effective, like larger, have more impact?
Khal was asking, what kind of strategy do you have to essentially scale your operations and have more impact?
I guess for us, I'll be very quick with this. For us, it's about just getting into as many spaces as we can to talk. This isn't something that's going to change overnight. We have to think 10, 20 years down the road. The Muslim population in Canada doubles in after how many years? Every 10 years. Every 10 years, the Muslim population doubles. So we're at 1.8 in 2021. By 2031, by 2032, we should probably be around 3.6 to 4 million. In 10 years' time, how many elections happen? Two, three, four, sometimes, depending on if it's a minority versus the majority government, right? If we're seeing this massive of a growth in our community, that means the impact should grow as well. But it can only grow if we get involved, right? And meaning involved for us is, okay, we need to be in the rooms where decisions are being made, right? So that means either if we're not the ones that are at the table, we have an ally that's at the table, right? And today's conversation is a lot about community, so we'll touch base on that a little bit. Number two is we want to become staffers, right? For TCMV, one of the biggest things is that we want people to work in political offices. Why is that important?
So like we get involved in the conversations to shape policy?
100%, right? That's a very good, so it's to help shape policy. If you have 5 files on your table and you get to choose which of those 5 files are going to be that you're going to put in front of your MP, which one are you choosing? The one that matters to you the most. This happens, right? Obviously, there's different levels. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but that's one of the things. So when you have people in the room, you're better able to explain stuff, right? Like, it's not being, actually it is being, whatever, okay, fine. So I have to be careful with what I say at times. There are MPs that'll visit a masjid, right, and not know what to dress up, right? Who's helping them with that? The staffers. But that's a very basic level, right? You can get into the then you get into the larger scale, okay? Why does it matter that Islamophobia has such a massive role in Canada? When it comes from your own staffer, when a hijabi or someone that's visibly Muslim goes and be like, this happened to me? I can raise up a hand. Have you experienced racism or Islamophobia at some point in your lives? Just raise your hand. Okay. Right? Pretty much half the room. Right? How many of us are in those rooms if we're not sharing those stories? Right? So when you're in that room and you're like, yeah, that happened to me, right? They're like, oh. Like I went to a conference in December, right? I was probably one of the only visibly Muslim people there. I'm an American citizen, guys. I'm a Canadian American citizen. Right?
You want this to be the first year?
No, heck no. Right? I was going into the US and they stopped me for 2 hours. Right? Secondary questioning. Talking to me about TCMV, talking to me about Islamic belief. I want Americans, they can't refuse entry for me. But they can make it difficult. I go and I tell this conference of people, majority of them are a single color, right? And their jaw drops. They're like, that's not okay. I'm like, yeah, it's not, but it's what it is, right? But it's that kind of thing, right? It's like, no, so now you've done your part in helping people understand that. Because one of the things that you hear is when you interact with people from other religions, other groups and stuff like this is, oh, you're different. Like, what? What does that even mean? It's like, oh, Umair, you're different. Like, I don't know what you mean by that. But what they mean is that, oh, you're normal enough for me to have a conversation with. But that's inherently racism. And you're tackling on that. It's like, no, everyone is fine. You just haven't made an effort to get to know the rest of the people. Just like in every community, there's differences. But that's the only way you're going to do is when you build allies, when you build communities. Sometimes as Muslim community, we become too insular. Right? We become too inward facing, and that's okay at times. But a lot of times we gotta get out, right? Becoming like ikhlaq is one of the things that's the best form of da'wah, right? And you don't even have to give them like. I was listening to a scholar talking one day, and he was like, sometimes we forget that there's a verse in the Quran, lakum dinukum waliyadin, right? My deen is mine, your deen is yours. But if you give them show your akhlaq, then they'll become more invested in this. So even politically speaking, like, yes, maintain your akhlaq and stuff like this, but there's different ways of getting involved, right? So this is where all these things sort of come into play. Sure. Go ahead. You could answer this one. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You give us like a lot of information, it's very complex and lots of parts. But like I want to put it in concrete terms, like in this riding Waterloo, there's Bodish Jagger. she has persistently ignored our requests for Palestine. So what would we be able to do strategically, like in this, like, can you make all these kind of points in concrete terms for this one riding, for this one person? How could we unseat her? What would we do in a strategic election? Who would we vote for?
So for your local riding, for example, for this one, let's say you have an MP that's been very inconsistent, that doesn't respond to you, how should you deal with that?
Yeah. So CMPAC strategy, for now, for the federal election, they have not come out with any sort of directions to vote yet. They're still in the research phase where they're kind of collecting data about whose track record is what, and what are the different options for the different candidates out there. Right now, it's more of a phase of building up like volunteer teams, and this is kind of also touching on the scaling aspect as well that the previous questioner asked. So CMPAC right now is in the phase of kind of scaling out, which is to say that right now we want to kind of scale horizontally, try to get as many volunteers recruited in as many different ridings and as many different key cities as possible, and simply just deliver the message for now, right? Right now, that includes basically visiting different candidates' offices in person and trying to get an audience. Of course, usually they don't really give you an audience, but at the very least, making that attempt, and then at the very least also delivering letters, promoting kind of call-in campaigns where people call into the office and try to like talk to those politicians about those particular topics. But that's kind of the phase that we're at right now. When it comes to when it's time to actually vote, then we'll basically try to align with what CMPAC kind of promotes. I don't know too much about like the Waterloo riding yet, because everybody's kind of in flux in terms of like their opinions on this topic, and there's not as much data available yet on different people's like old track records, except for the incumbent, obviously. But for example, like Kitchener City Centre, we have Mike Morris, who's had a pretty positive track record when it comes to Palestine. He's put forward the motion to, at the very least, condemn what Israel is doing, which is a start. I mean, it's a process, baby steps, basically. But in that case, we would try to make sure that he stays in power, for example, right?
Sorry?
Jagged is the opposite.
So here's my personal opinion, not Umair the TCMV opinion. All right, I have to sort of make that a little bit of a thing. Each riding by riding, it's going to be very important to figure out who's the best sort of face for that. Up until the reason why things are taking a little bit longer is because of the fact that we're not sure what's going to happen with the Liberal leadership race. Depending on who comes in as a Liberal leader will then dictate how things progress moving forward. And what I mean by that is the race is right now between 5 candidates, right? So you got Mark Carney, got Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould, Frank Bayless, and Ruby Dullah. Fun fact, Ruby used to be an actress in Bollywood. I don't know how she became an MP, but when you say I can't become an MP, just remember that for a second, that anyone can become an MP, right? So do not let that deter. If you have the backing, you can do it. What I mean by these 5 sort of running is whoever sort of comes in as the leader of the Liberal Party, that will then dictate the polls. Polls generally, as wrong as it sounds, will generally win elections, right? Depending on which way a riding is going, people will generally go in and do that. So as of about a month ago, there's 343 ridings in Canada. The Conservative Party was about to win 240 seats. To put that in perspective, that is a mammoth, absolutely huge majority, right? Majority is won at 174 seats. To say that you're almost 70 seats over that is insane. And the official opposition was going to be who? The Bloc Québécois, right? The last time that combination happened was in 1984. The reason why I bring this up is the Bloc has been very vocal on their support for Palestine, right? If anyone's following politics, they're quite vocal on Palestine. But on the flip side, they do whatever they do, right? Which can lead into different areas. So from a Muslim community perspective, does it make sense that, oh, no, but they speak well? So when we're looking at everything has to be taken in a weighted average, right? When you're creating a rubric to sort of look at different candidates coming in, right? Yes, Israel-Palestine is on top of our list. On a weighted average scale, it's quite up there. But you're also looking at, because we're not a monolith, right? We're not a single issue voting communities. But what we are is when we unite, that one single issue can be the driving force behind it. And Palestine has done that. It has united the community quite a bit from all walks of life. So when it comes down to understanding, if this riding Waterloo, a lot will be figured out as we get closer to the and see who wins, right? And then once that Liberal Party candidates come in, then we'll have a better idea where things are going, right? And that's when we'll sort of figure out, okay, if this is better, then that's better. But when it comes to, like, for example, a specific MP, right? We always say, and we always, as community organizations, you make a recommendation, but you're always talking to the local representatives, meaning the local Muslim community, and getting their input first. Because they will tell us, this makes sense. Or that. We can make the assumption that, out of the 4 candidates, Bardish is the best one. But you guys come and be like, wait. No. Then things change. Right? And then it's like, then we get into more of a conversation about, who is the next best alternative? Right? And why are they an alternative? And what's the chances of this versus what's the chances of that? And then a question comes in is, what if we abstain from voting? So there's 2 ways of abstaining from voting. All right, sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but really quickly. One is I'm not gonna go vote, right? And that's the worst thing that we can do. The second thing is called spoiling your ballot. So you actually go to the poll and then you cross off, you're like, I'm not gonna vote for anyone. That's way more effective than the other one. Because after each election, right, your local MP's office is gonna get a manifest, right? How many of you live in Waterloo? How many of you are gonna be voting in Waterloo, right? So what happens then is that office will get, Mustafa Shahad didn't go to vote, right? Umair Ashraf didn't go to vote, right? Amin went to vote, right? But if there's like 45, let's say your riding is about 70,000 people, and about 45,000 people went to vote, and your riding is about 10,000 Muslims, and only 1,000 Muslims went to vote. Do you think they're going to care about the community, about what they stand for? Because you're not getting them the votes. Why does it matter if you're involved or not involved? We can go and knock on their doors and do all those different things, but ultimately, if you can't hurt them or join them or do different things, they're not going to care. That number has to go up for us, right? Do they know what religion you are? No. But they do know your names. And they can deduce from there. It's like, maybe, maybe not, right? And if census has said that there's 10,000 Muslims in this riding, then probably chances are, if these 10,500 names, they probably are Muslim. So this is how strategy works. This is how all these different things work. So when we're figuring out all these things, it's a big puzzle that you're trying to fit together, right? So as of right now, if you were to ask us, give us a recommendation of what we're going to do in this riding, we probably can't give you that just yet. Ask us in 3 weeks, probably. But in the meantime, you continue to talk with all the candidates, because a lot of the nominations have gone out already, right? Who's running and which riding, they're already starting to take shape. So book meetings with every candidate and ask them the same questions, right? Ask them, where do you stand on this? What's this? This. But make sure their mandate fits within the federal system. And that's where you can actually reach out to TCMV and we'll help you curate those questions.
And another thing to quickly just to add on to there is CMPAC or other organizations may recommend you to vote in a specific direction. Let's say the votes are placed and then the candidate that we didn't want to win still wins. As long as the Muslim vote shows up, is recorded in the data as having shown up and shown to have voted in a specific direction, that is still, in our eyes, a victory, right? If a politician that's the incumbent wins by a smaller margin than ever before, or they're it's basically just a toss-up, a couple of votes that they won by, then that still is a fear-inducing factor for them for the next election, right? So perhaps the hope is that they'll go and evaluate why that happened and then adjust course in the future. Yeah.
So you talked about voting and stuff, and I'm sure you get a lot of these questions, right? The specific question, and I'm curious how you respond to it when people come and say that, voting is haram. How do you respond to that?
For sure. You want to? I can.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm not necessarily an expert in these topics.
I'm not asking for legal ruling,
but
just how you respond, basically.
Yeah. In my opinion, if we look at our history, right, our predecessors, not necessarily ancestors, but predecessors, lived under non-Muslim societies, right, and they still actively participated in those societies, right. So as Muslims, we're not supposed to kind of cloister ourselves away and isolate ourselves from the broader public, but rather we're supposed to participate, right. Generally, when people say, "Oh, voting is haram" or whatever, what they are implying is that when you vote for a specific candidate, you are in support of the entirety of their policy in its collective state, right? But in reality, politics doesn't really work that way, right? Yeah, well, politics doesn't really work that way. In reality, what you're voting is for a delta, like a difference, right, in the different parties. And at the end of the day, I think the harm that would come from us not participating in the political systems of the countries that we live in far outweighs any other factor, right? If we just don't participate at all, then we'll never be advocated for. We'll never be able to make our opinions known, we'll never be able to essentially advocate for Islamic positions, right? For goodness and for justice in these societies, right? And they'll just be allowed to devolve over time, right?
So I again, I know you guys call this Sheikh and Shai, but we're truly not Sheikhs with this, right? But I've sat with a lot of ulama to ask them questions, and from all the madahibs, right, just to get an understanding of where each and every one of them sort of stand. So I would highly recommend all of you to go to your sheikh or whoever it is and actually ask them these questions because it's important. But there's a really good article written by Yaqeen Institute by Imam Tom on is voting haram, right? And he goes into different dalils of different things, right? So I would highly recommend you guys read that. So one of the biggest things that sort of comes in is when it comes to voting and choosing your leader, right? There's difference of opinions on certain things. A lot of times the folks that consider it to be haram say it is because they believe that you're giving your waqala, which is you're making them a proxy of you to the government. So anything that happens, what happens from there? The other side of that coin is that, well, technically, no, this is the system that you're in, right? And you're technically not giving them your waqala, you're participating in whatever the system is. You don't believe that this is the most perfect system. Right? Allah's system is the most perfect. If you go in with thinking that this is the perfect system, then that you're entering into a whole other level of fiqh and stuff like this. So it actually has to be separated a little bit from the fiqh conversation. But what it comes down to at the end of the day, and this is my taking, and again, I will preface this by saying this. You do not have to agree with me, right? Just because I'm sitting up here does not mean you have to agree with me. You can critique me, you can challenge me, as you should. That's your right. That's my responsibility to be able to answer it. And to be quite frank, I don't have answers to everything. Neither does Habeeb, right? We're just sheikhs. I'm kidding, right? I'm here for the chai, right? But no, but at the least what we can do is go and find answers for you, right? And help us on that journey together to be able to get that answer. My take on this question is you vote because you're choosing the lesser of the two evils type thing, right? And I firmly believe that if you don't vote, that's ultimately a vote for the party that wins, right? Spoiling your ballot's different because you're going in and you're making a very concentrated effort that no, I'm not going to vote for anyone. But if you choose to be an absentee voter or not go in, then you're effectively giving your vote to the party that wins, right? But again, we're looking at this from a 10, 20 years down the road type thing. So it's fine. You don't believe in it, but what are you doing to change the narrative moving forward? That's what something's come down to. Can we get, if there's questions on this side, I know we answered a lot of questions on this side, but if there's questions on this side, then.
Yeah, 1 second. We do have one, but I know Mustafa's been.
Okay, Mustafa's itching. All right, go Mustafa.
Then there's a question on the form. I'm going to go to that.
Okay.
It's actually not a crazy question. It's actually a very basic question, and I think it's important to clear this up because I have some sort of ideas here and there, but I don't know where it's like how everything. I don't understand it very clearly. So can you explain the process from A to Z?
Sure.
In like very straightforward terms of what I vote for, who do I vote for, what does an MP do, what does he do in the parliament, and how does a decision, how much weight does his decision have in the parliament, and how much does it have globally, and why can't we have Muslim MPs? Why is it hard? Why do I have to vote for another? Just having these few points cleared up, I think would be good. So,
Man said it was basic.
Yeah, it's
a
even
10-part
I have
question.
even I have to try to solve that question for this side. So Mustafa was asking, can we explain A to Z sort of, I think, what that whole process is of how do you get your voice from here right now to up there? So right now, me as a citizen of Waterloo, then how do I get my word to my MP? Then how does the MP get the voice to, the large legislative body? And then how much weight does that one MP have in the whole legislative body? Is that sort of, yeah?
Simple
Okay.
question.
Sorry? Yeah, simple question.
Attempt to
Go ahead. I can fill in whatever
this
needs
is
to be
a very,
filled in.
very broad and hard question, so I'll try to simplify it as much as
I
possible.
think we might need to use a whiteboard for this one.
So I guess I'll start with a statement that's kind of contrary, right? Your voice probably won't reach anywhere, right? And what do I mean by that, right?
why are we here?
Right? So what do I mean by that? So your voice alone, right, in its individual sense, isn't really going to make any significant change anywhere on any level, right? But all of our voices in unison, that's what brings about the change, right? So I know that's kind of corny or whatever, but like it's the reality, right? So the focus should be really on like community mobilization and mobilization en masse in a very like aligned direction. So in terms of how exactly the mechanics work, so there's like three different levels of government in Canada, right? We all took civics class, hopefully in high school, or maybe some of us
Failed it.
So your lowest level is basically your municipal level, right? So you have local elections, majority vote wins, and you have somebody who's kind of part of different cities may have different systems, but basically you have your mayor that's elected to represent to run the city essentially, right? One level above that, you have the provincial elections. Provinces have what's called the provincial legislative assembly, and each so the province at large is divided into a bunch of ridings, right? Just like in the federal election, the country is divided into a bunch of ridings. There is a general effort made historically to kind of make sure that each riding has roughly the same amount of population, and so when you vote in the provincial elections, you vote for an MPP, member of provincial parliament, right? They, when elected, will then go sit in the legislative assembly in Toronto and place votes on bills that get tabled in that house, right? Bills are typically drafted up by whatever a majority exists, or whatever party exists that has the most number of ridings, right? They get tabled, and then everybody votes. Hopefully, after having read the bill. During that entire process, your MPP should ideally be fielding input from their members of their riding, right? So people like you, people like your neighbors, you convey messages to them and give them your opinion. And hopefully they pass that on in their vote at the provincial level, right? So that's kind of how things get done at the provincial level. And on the federal level, we have 343 ridings across the country. In each riding, you place a vote for a member of parliament. And again, it's a similar process where the member of parliament goes and sits in the House of Commons and votes on bills that get tabled in the House of Commons, typically drafted and written up by the party that's in power. But if they're a minority government, then they perhaps have to cooperate with other parties to kind of come up with a middle ground bill that everybody's kind of happy with, that will pass. How you specifically, or people who elect these officials specifically make their voice heard, is by hopefully moving in unison and telling your politician effectively that this is what we want from you, this is how we want you to vote, this is the direction that we want you to vote, and if you don't, then you won't get our vote next time around, right? That's like the kind of gist of it, right? And so through that mechanism, over time, the hope is that if enough people are politically involved, if enough people make their opinions known, and if enough people change their vote in accordance with past performance of these elected officials, then over time, hopefully you have the will of the people represented within all levels of government. Whether or not it actually works out like that is a different story, but that's the theory.
That was well said. Well done.
It's kind of off the cuff.
No, it's great. I'll add a couple of things for that very quickly. So in terms of, I guess, what does each level of government look after? So your federal government, you got immigration and citizenship, you got national defense and foreign policy, you got economy. That was an ESL moment right there. And employment, you got health and pharmaceuticals, infrastructure and transportation, climate, environment, and indigenous affairs. That sort of falls under your federal, right? Then you guys got your provincial government, right? When's the provincial election, guys? Feb 27. See, this side of the room was sleeping right here, all right? So you guys got to figure out who you're voting for in the, if you're going to go vote, but if you're not going to go vote, you're going to go to the ballot, you're going to spoil your ballot, right, to show that Muslims care.
We voted before.
Okay, advanced voting, give mashallah, well done.
That's why we're not.
That's why you're not speaking. Okay, provincial government, you're looking after what? Healthcare, education, housing, transportation, energy, and justice, right, and policing. So when your uncle from the masjid goes up to your MP and is like, why is my child being taught this in school? What's the MP gonna say? Not my jurisdiction, right? Thank you for I will take it into consideration. But now if that uncle goes to the MPP and being like, why are you supporting a curriculum in this way? Now you're having more of a conversation. Knowing who to talk to and what to talk to is very important. If you go to your math prof and ask a computer science question, they're gonna be like, what's wrong with you, kid? Right? And that's the way things go. It's you got to know who you're talking to, who your audience is, and what you're trying to say. Oh, sorry, my bad. See, that's why I'm not in math and CS. All right, don't go talk to. I don't know who to. Whatever, bro. Almost got kicked out of university. This is why. Right? Your municipal government then looks after local roads and traffic management. So all that snow that's on University Avenue, that's the municipality's job, right? Then it's the public transit, your waste management, local parks, property, and community safety. On a daily basis, your municipal government is actually the most important. It impacts us on a day-to-day basis. Provincial and federal is a little bit more and more, but federally you're not going to see it till a lot later because it's on more of a macro scale. But it'll impact. It's the one that we interact with the most. But technically, we should be as engaged as we are on the municipal and provincial level. I'm going to go back to one point because you explained it perfectly. The only thing that I will say is, one of the most important things that we can do in politics, especially on the municipal and federal level, is understand when a party leadership race is happening, that we get involved in that. Why is that? What's a party leadership race?
Whoever gets to lead the federal party.
Or the municipal party. Yes, provincial party. Correct. What do they do?
Set the agenda.
They set the agenda. They set the mandates. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You can say it. No. Okay. All right. But technically, that's why it's so important. So depending on what leader comes in, they bring their own ideologies. So when there's two different leaders that are happening, because right now in the federal liberal leadership race, that is a tongue twister. The reason why we're so invested in that is whoever leader comes in, right, will then set the tone of what the Liberal Party stands for. And when you're MP, when you go and talk to them and they're like, oh, it's out of my party lines are set by the leadership. So you want to get them into the leadership so that way they can then say whatever they need to say. A lot of times you might have approached a minister and asked them about Palestine and they said, I can't comment on that because they are part of the Senate. Sorry, not Senate. They're part of the cabinet, right? When they're part of the cabinet, they can't say as much as someone that's not in cabinet, right? So there's differences there. Yes, some will be a little bit more vocal, others will not be as much. People speaking on side of Palestine were a lot more quieter than people speaking on the opposite side, right? Because there's lobbying, there's all these things. So each vote matters, each dollar matters, and each sort of conversation matters. All right.
So the question was, how can you trust anyone, right? For MPs or even party leaders who claim or promise one thing, then they go back on that. For instance, Trump, he had, I think, in Michigan those shuyukh in even in the bish, then the whole hat and stuff, and then they even said, I believe God saved him or something like that. They gave a strong endorsement, and then now he's doing what he's doing with Gaza, unfortunately.
So the short answer is you don't trust anyone, ever. Especially in politics. Expect a politician to always, they shift with the times, with the sands of whatever, will be in their best interests. But that's the key aspect, right? They will always act in their best interests, and their primary interest is to maintain their seat, right? To maintain their position in power. So you don't trust, but what you do is you place the vote, and then make sure that you hold them accountable thereafter, right? So if they don't follow up on their promises, if they break their promises, if they move a different way, then you say, well, I guess you've lost my vote, right? But it's not just at the time of voting that these things matter, right? The key is that you have to kind of be quote unquote campaigning nonstop, 24/7 throughout the year, every year, right? And be active politically throughout that entire time. If you only show up, at the time of elections, then they'll just promise whatever, and there's not really a kind of strong, repeated message that's kind of sticking in the back of everyone's minds. Whereas if you're constantly politically engaged and participating at all levels of elections in all different parts of the country, then over time, all of those little kind of trickles of water build into a flood, right? And eventually, without even knowing it, people have shifted their entire paradigm of understanding of all these issues, right? So that's kind of the gist of it, is small, consistent efforts to hold people accountable.
Absolutely right. The only thing that I'll add to that very quickly, and we'll take that question over here. If we look at the Sikh community, right, 770,000 in Canada, but very, very involved. When a farmers' protest is happening in India, the Prime Minister here is speaking about it, right? That's consistent effort throughout years of campaigning, lobbying, and understanding what the community needs, right? It's things like this where over time, when you build yourself up, this is what you're going to get yourself into. But that can only happen with sustained effort, especially, as Habeeb was mentioning, things will go south, right? Things will go the way we didn't want it to go. But how do you sort of maintain that pressure afterwards? What do you do enough to sort of keep engaging, but at the same time keep holding them accountable? The real work actually happens when there is no election, right? That's when people sort of move away and not pay attention to a lot of stuff happening. But what motions are we put forward? What bills are being passed? Are we paying attention? Are we not? All these things matter at all levels of government, right? So,
Go for it.
So when you do enter the political system in whatever capacity it may be, and you're sort of met with that rejection, whether it be against party lines or however it is, how do you sort of, I guess, cope with that feeling that you're not able to do anything because this is just sort of the status quo, this is how our political system has been structured? How can force change when it's sort of reality? I guess sort of how do you cope with that?
Yeah.
Could you repeat it for everybody?
I guess the question was,
Sorry.
when you're participating at a very kind of small level, right? Whatever best efforts you can put forward, how do you cope with the fact, with the idea that, or the feeling that the status quo will always be the status quo, and there's not really much you can do to have an impact, right? So I guess the kind of answer to that is that in our Deen, there's this idea of putting forth your best effort and then trusting it all out for the result, right? When a long time ago, back in the days of our predecessors, an individual person would be just kind of a cog in the machine of, let's say, a Muslim, military force or a Muslim governing body, but because they were individually sincere and they just kept on working nonstop, consistently without fail, eventually their efforts were rewarded. Right? So the idea is that, again, like individually, we don't actually make any impact, right? We only make an impact as a group, together, as a community. And so your, whatever small part you're playing in that overall effort is eventually going to have an impact. You just have to trust in the process and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that something will yield. And even if nothing yields, at least you tried, right? At least you made the effort, and your reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not with the results in this world, right? Although we obviously hope that happens.
So I sit with a lot of staffers, right? A lot of Muslim staffers, and we actually have a lot of conversation with all of them about the work that they're doing and the importance of it. And one of the things that they will say is that when you're in those rooms, like sometimes it feels like you're not moving the needle or anything like that, but they're still hearing you because you've built a personal relationship with a lot of your leaders in different places. So right now, I think about 50 or 60 of them sent a letter to the Prime Minister, right, saying that what was happening in Palestine was not, and what the response was not good enough, right? This is sort of unheard of in the past because a lot of them, because as I say, their voice gets washed out, but this was a big step, right? So it's something that seems that small, but it actually has big ramifications in different ways, right? All these different things and led to the Prime Minister ultimately stepping down, right? So it was not just because of what's happening in Palestine or what's happening in different places, but it was ultimately different pressures from all the different angles that sort of led to those different things, right? So as Habeeb was mentioning, it's a larger scale thing happening in order for things to sort of change. And so even being in these spaces sometimes might not feel like it's futile or worth it, but you do your best till you can, right? And you present your ideas, and if ultimately one person sort of walks away from there thinking about it a little differently, that's one less person you have to worry about, right? And now you're building those bridges to then go back and being like, oh, okay, I said this, or you said this, or so to give you an idea, we play basketball every Thursday evening, right? In October of 2023, when the genocide was when it was starting, actually, it was already started for a long time ago. But in a 6-week span, one of our brothers that was there, we had to give him condolences 4 times. Right? 4 times. And each time that we did, all the non-Muslims that were in that group gave their condolences as well. These are boys that were grown up in Cambridge, don't know much about anything, right? Are far away from it, but their connection into this was because we played basketball every Thursday night and we went to high school together. Right. Now, one of the guys wants to run for city councilor position in Cambridge. He came up to me. He's like, Umair, will I get the Muslim vote? I'm like, yeah, sure. We'll make it happen because he understand what the community is going through. But these are the small little things that we can do to sort of make an impact, right? And it's something simple as this ball, but it's there, right? You're on a daily basis, you have different opportunities to sort of make an impact. Sorry, I'm going to say this one really quickly, but I keep going on these tangents. There's this research that was done. Have you guys heard of Vanessa Van Edwards? Yes? Huh? No. She's a behavioral scientist who looks at different things, right? So she looks at, and again, this is a study that I'm sort of trying to learn more about and trying to understand how we can utilize it in different ways. But the reason why I bring this up is when you asked, like, studying people, when she looked at who was the most popular person in high school, what do you think the answer was? Yell it out. Good looks? Oh, Halwa? Yeah, Halwa's good looking. Yeah, I guess it's that much, right? No, not good looks. What else?
Was it like the charming way of like talking to people?
Charismatic? No.
Was communicative?
Most communicative? No.
The jock?
Smartest? No. What?
The jock?
The jock? No.
The richest?
The richest?
The richest? No. One last answer.
Student government?
Student government? No. So the person, again, I have to research this, but what she was saying was the person that had the longest list of people that they liked, or that they liked something about them, was the person that was the most popular in high school. Take that in for a second. The person that had the longest list of people that they liked something about was the person that was the most popular in high school. The reason I bring that up is because that one person made small micro interactions with people on a daily basis. Like, when you're walking down the hall, hey, hi, hey, salam, this, right? The impact that it has on people is massive, right? And Prophet ﷺ, anyone that would come to him would think that he was the best friend. Because every time that he met someone, he met them with such ikhlaq, with such a purity that the other person walked away feeling that, oh, like this person knows me, right? And it was such a mind-blowing thing for me. So the reason why I bring that up is when we're building allyship, when we're building in people that we need to become and understand what we're going through, these are the ways of doing it. Interactions on a daily basis, even micro, go a long way, and that's backed by scientific evidence.
Sometimes just one little small thing. I like to kind of think about this like kind of weird fact, which is that we know obviously a lot of named Sahabas and Sahabiyat, right? And we know their names, their stories, their biographies, and some of them we know very little about, right? And then there are actually many of them whom we know nothing about. Like, we don't even know their names. We don't know who they were. We know nothing about them. But at the end of the day, they did their part, right? And they're going to be in paradise alongside the Prophet, right? So no one, like, we don't necessarily have to have grand designs or huge positions or whatever in whatever effort that we're embarking on. We just need to do the job that's handed to us in the best way possible. And then together as a group, inshallah, then we'll make a difference.
Okay, we'll take maybe like one more question. I think Danny didn't get a chance, so go with Danny. Sorry, bro.
Hold on, sorry. I'm still waiting on my Akhira Athletic, bro. Where's my sweater? I asked her last time.
Wait, which one do you want?
Oh, I'll talk to you after. Okay, go ahead.
So I think we have one in
No problem.
So on the topic of like small efforts, a lot of people sometimes will share around these links to like join an email petition, or I don't know exactly how they work, but maybe you put in your email. I don't know if you like, they say that you also agree with this email that you're sending to your MPP or MP. Are these effective? Should we focus more on those individual conversations where we personally reach out? Or is this kind of like substantial enough that we should be filling these out?
Hot take, I guess. Obviously, it depends on a case-by-case basis, right? Like, if it's a large organization that's reputable, that's pushing this petition, and they're going to actually take it to the people that need to see it, then great. I think, like, just my personal opinion, obviously you can do those, and that's great. But even better is to individually reach out to your representative with a phone call. If not a phone call, then an email, and just do that on a regular basis. Literally, like, people who are very politically involved, just set aside like a little bit of time each week and just make that weekly phone call, right? And so if we have, just one person calling in all the time, then it's just like some weird annoying guy, right? To the politician, they're just like, yeah, we can ignore them. Like, they don't matter. But if there's, 50,000 people calling in the local ridings every single week, adding to this, like basically clogging up all the communication lines, right? Anytime something happens and we need to send a message, then that's like a very powerful message, right? That shows to the politician that, like, I literally can't get anything done. It's kind of like that scene in Harry Potter where he gets the invite to the Hogwarts, but they try to stop it, and it's just like filling up the entire house. That kind of visual is, I think, more powerful than aggregating everyone's emails into like one attempt, essentially. I think, my personal opinion, though.
Just think with that, if it's a government of Canada petition at a certain level of signatures, they have to then bring it in discussion. So it makes an impact in that sense. But yes, the daily interactions with your politician matter because their office has to track every time an email is sent, every time a phone call is made and every time you make an in-person visit. So it goes to show that, oh, okay, this happened, right? So all those things come back and be like, okay, people are not paying attention, right? For the longest time, we were seen as a walking, like pretty much a shoe-in vote for the Liberal Party, right? Because a lot of our parents grew up with, oh, they let us into the country, we're loyal, right? But that doesn't work anymore. So things are changing in different ways of getting involved, but on all sort of levels, right? Just very quickly, can any of you name 3 councillors in your cities that you're from? 3 councillors. What's a councillor? What's a councillor? A councillor is in your local government. They run the ward that you're serving. So your council is what sits along with the mayor to make decisions on what's happening. How many of us can name 3 or even 2 or maybe 1? Colleen James. Okay, who else?
Bob.
Anita. She's your MP. Right, no, councillor. Municipal level, very low.
Bob.
Bob?
Richard.
Bob, okay. All right, Richard. Okay. What's his last name?
Bob?
Bob, all right.
Bob.
Bob the Builder.
No, the reason why Bob the Builder, the reason why I say that is because if we don't know who they are, how are we going to hold them accountable? Right? Like how? We don't even know who you are. I don't know what you'd stand for. Right? Like, even for me, like in Cambridge right now, we're going to figure out who to vote for in the MPP, right? I'm reaching out to Muslims that have interacted with them in order to be like, okay, can we or should we not? Because every single nominee that's out there, someone should have made some sort of touch point with them. I firmly believe that every politician needs a Muslim's voice in their ear. Every single one of them, right? And we talked about Trump a little bit, even Trump. At some point, I don't know if it'll get through, but you're sort of just speaking away at different things that matter to you, right? Even here locally, we need that because they need to know what the community needs and what wants and what needs to happen. And something simple as like, you know, like the Waterloo Masjid, when they do a big Eid Salah in a park, right? Do you guys do that here? Does that Rim Park, right? That needs a permit. That has to get approved by a city, right? It's things like this where we don't think it matters on a daily basis, but it does. But if we don't even know their names, they're not going to know who we are. Right? So, all right. Sorry, man.
Yeah. No,
You
you're
can
great.
Conclude. Can I just do like a quick plug? Or?
Yeah, sure. I was actually going to ask just one more question.
Sure.
And
Okay.
then
Yeah.
if you wanna-
Yeah.
okay.
At the end of that.
Yeah. I just want to close off with just one question, which is that, you both can give your own, I think, pretty cool perspectives because I think you're doing this more on a part-time basis.
Very, very part-time.
And you're doing this on like a full-time basis, right? So can you sort of, everybody here, each of you give like an action item, right? On what each of us can do. If you want to pursue your more full-time path, how should one start? And if you want to pursue your more part-time path, where can they start?
Yeah. So I guess
In the sphere of advocacy and,
yeah. I guess I'll take the opportunity to do a quick plug for CMPAC. One thing that we're doing right now is trying to build as many teams as possible, volunteer teams in every single riding that we want to be active in. And all the ridings in this area we want to hopefully be active in. So a lot of your responsibilities would include eventually running things like workshops, lectures, and like community events that motivate Muslim people in the area to get out and register to vote or to eventually vote in a specific direction, whatever CMPAC kind of informs us about. Eventually, even maybe going door to door, knocking on people's doors and talking to them about the election. Hopefully, when the weather gets a bit warmer, and eventually. Also reaching out to politicians yourself as part of this effort with letters, with calls, with whatever means possible. So if you do want to volunteer and sign up, you can go to electpalestine.ca. So that's electpalestine.ca. Very simple. And there's like a form you fill in, you put in your riding, and then eventually one of the team members will get your information, and then we'll add you to like a WhatsApp group and then start from there. Right now, we have very few people in the local area, so just me and one other guy. So we need signups, hopefully. But yeah, so encourage everyone to do that. That's an excellent way to get started. Other than that, everything that we've been mentioning, right? Just calling in, emailing in, or ideally aligning with some organization that's working in an organized way, because that's always what makes your effort more effective, right?
The only thing I'll add is again, going back to the why, right? Answer that first. That's your action item. The why do I want to get involved? And then how you can get involved is CMPAC, joining TCMV if you want to do more, education-based stuff, right? You don't want to necessarily be doing a lot of advocacy. We'll take all the help that we can get. But ultimately, you have to chart your path, which way you want to go. And if you can't chart it, reach out to us, reach out to me, and all of a sudden I'll do a one-to-one with you guys, right? And we'll sort of see where you sort of fit in and what you can bring to the table, but also what can you accomplish with that, right? Because again, if you don't believe you have a role to play, then we're not doing our job well, right? But if everyone has a role to play, then we can figure out what that role is. And it can be something simple as just being a forwarder, right? A forwarder is, I guess, something I just, right? Like my mom in the morning, good morning, assalamu alaikum, and then there's a post out forward, right? And then that's something that happens. But you need those type of people because it's important to get that message across. We're always looking for researchers, right? A lot of you are incredible researchers in order to find out different things, but also the questions that we haven't answered, how can we answer them, right? And the questions that we haven't thought about, what do we have to look in? Because ultimately, a lot of times people come in that aren't in politics with a different viewpoint that we have been blindsided by because we can't see it anymore, right? So when you come in with that perspective, it's like, okay, I forgot about this, right? Let's chat about this. So there's definitely different ways, but feel free to reach out. Mustafa, Rabab, if you guys can share my contact. No calling me after 10 p.m. That's the only rule. Except you can. This guy calls all the time. No, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, but feel free to reach out, email, whatever sort of works. But ultimately, we're here to help you guys figure out what your journey is, what it looks like, and then we can sort of take it from there. And then ultimately helping CMPAC locally, NCCM locally, TCMV, any other organization. But also go help a campaign if you're interested. Right? Find out a candidate that you really want to be a part of and go see how the system works. What do they do? Why do they do it? What impact it can have, and then you go from there.
Awesome. And you guys can also add them on LinkedIn. So
Yes.
there's Habeeb Ahmed and Umair Ashraf. So you guys can. We are going to close up. Brother Tariq, by the way, you can ask them after just because I'm wrapping up. And
Yeah, I'm here for a
You can
bit.
have a conversation with them afterwards. Would you guys like to do any closing comments or we're good?
That was it.
That was it? Okay, alhamdulillah. In that case, I will let Mustafa do his thing.
Yes, assalamu alaikum everyone. Are you guys good to stick around for 10 minutes?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so the two brothers are gonna stick around for if any sisters have any private questions, inshallah. And then he'll come with us, the brothers, inshallah. So sisters first. I know you want to ask your question. Another announcement is that tomorrow we have our fiqh Q&A finally. So Mufti Hamad also agreed to take in live questions. And he'll also accept follow-ups. So make sure to come by SLT 7:30 p.m. Jazakumullah khair. Today we're wrapping up Sheikh Shai for this term. Mr. Puffs is there, so let's try to finish it, inshallah. So there's no leftovers.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah. Okay, inshallah.
Okay. Jazakumullah khairan, guys. A round of applause, please.
Well done, sir. First